Okay, hey everyone. It's me from that one Coaster Enthusiast or something like that. So I know I forgot to upload for a while. It's been a good 3 months since I even visited the park I'm reviewing today, which is Six Flags Great America. Yeah, no, it's definitely been a quick minute, mainly because I just kind of forgot. I mean, it wasn't on the top of my list of things to do, and I just didn't think about it. But I mean, I'm uploading now, so yeah. And also, before we get started, let me make it clear that this footage is not mine. This is Coaster Studios footage. Because again, I don't really take park footage. I like to enjoy the park. But anyway, let's start with the first thing I rode, which was Superman Ultimate Flight. Now, Superman Ultimate Flight, while it was different, because I haven't ridden a flying coaster, it was definitely kind of underwhelming and forceless. There's only like one forceful moment on the ride or something, and it's only 52 miles per hour and 115 feet tall. So, I mean, I don't know, it's okay, it's different, I enjoyed it, and you should definitely ride it when you go, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it was like outstanding or anything, because it really wasn't. So I'd give it, I don't know, about a 6 out of 10. And also, don't mind the noises in the background, because if you hear a dog, which I think you will, I'm just outside right now because I felt like it and it feels nice outside. So, sorry for any excess noises or anything. So, next up, let's just go to Vertical Velocity, which was closed half the day, but I ended up riding it eventually. Now, this was definitely a different type of ride and experience, and the launch was decently forceful. And it was a good ride and all, but I feel like it's just a tad bit short. And I don't know, the operations were really slow when I went, which I'm not going to factor into the ending out of 10, whatever. But I'm not sure if it's like that all the time, but they were pretty slow. So even with like a very short line, it was like 20 minutes. So it wasn't the best operations that day, but I will not take that into account when I say how much I liked it. So on this ride, I think I'd give it a 6.5 out of 10. So a little bit better than Ultimate Flight. And it's definitely something that you should ride if you're there, because there are not many. It's a pretty rare ride, or type of ride. And next, let's go to the Joker, the free fly coaster. This was actually really fun, not very painful, unlike the Zack spins I hear are. This was actually really fun. This was the first free fly coaster by SNS I've ever ridden, or free fly coaster in general. It was very fun, actually, and I would definitely suggest riding it because it's not as bad as it looks or seems. It was definitely a very, very interesting experience when it comes to coasters and whatnot. I had a really good time on it, actually, and I'd even give it a 7.5 out of 10. Anyway, that's that. Now let's get on to Viper. Viper is one of the wooden coasters at the park, and is actually very fun, and it's, I don't know, I really do enjoy its layout, because it's definitely different, compared to others. It had a decent bit of airtime, surprisingly, because I guess when you're watching POVs, it doesn't seem like it. Like when I watched POV, I thought, okay, this is going to be a basic wooden coaster. I was actually decently surprised. So for this, I'd give it about a 7.5 out of 10. Next is X-Flight, which is the wing coaster at the park. And this was the second wing coaster I rode through the year, or ever in general. The one I rode before this was Wild Eagle, which has a normal drop compared to this having a wing over drop. where you invert and then go through a half loop, and that's the drop, really. I will say the drop was definitely cooler on this, but I also feel like Wild Eagle's drop was good as well. So I'm not saying that the drop is bad, because it is definitely very fun. But I think the wing over drop is definitely more interesting and different. So that's why I like it a bit more. This was definitely a fun coaster. Not one of the most forceful rides, but it's meant to give you a feel of flying and stuff. And the near miss elements were really cool, because they didn't have any of those on Wild Eagle, except for like the support beams, which sometimes felt like near miss elements at different points, and depending on which side you're on. But this had 2 near miss elements that were very cool, and you go through them at the perfect speed to give you the illusion that you're going to hit them. And all in all, it's a very fun ride. I would give it an 8 out of 10. Next, we're going to go on to Raging Bull, which is a hyper coaster at the park with a height of... Never mind. This app isn't giving me the height. Never mind. All you know is it's above 200 feet. So this is the B&M Hyper. And for being the first hyper I've ridden, it was good. But compared to other hypers, and from what I see of the others, it's not that great. Like having a trim on the airtime hill, which slows you down decently. Like you can definitely hear it loud and clear as you go by it. You hear the like it's loud, and it's definitely slowing you down a tad bit, which kind of makes the airtime very, very minimal floater, when it could be a bit better. And there was really only like 1 airtime moment on the ride, maybe 2. The rest was like helixes and just normal turns and stuff. It just wasn't the most amazing, because it was definitely slightly underwhelming, but it still was good. I'd give it about a 7.5 out of 10. But you should definitely ride it when you're there. Same with all the last ones I've gone over. Anyway. Next, let's get on to Demon, which I rode in front row, because when I entered the queue, it was completely empty and they were just about to leave, and so I just hopped in front row. And yeah, so I only rode it in the front row, and I only rode it once, I believe, because that day was decently busy for being a Monday. But it was smooth compared to Ninja at Six Flags St. Louis. It was definitely smooth. The only rough parts were right after the corkscrew, and the loops were very forceful. Like, I mean, they pushed my head down, or the second one did especially. It was definitely forceful, so it made it slightly painful, the inversion, the 2 loops did. But other than that, those 3-ish moments, it wasn't really that painful. It was actually really good for an Aero custom looper. I would give this about a 7 out of 10, and I would definitely ride it if you're there. So next is Batman the Ride, which is at Six Flags St. Louis and most Six Flags parks. So nothing special, but it was the very first Batman the Ride and the very first inverted coaster to ever be built, so it gives it a little bit more significance when you're riding it. And I do enjoy this color scheme more than the one at St. Louis, because it's all black compared to this one having yellow track and black supports. I do enjoy the color scheme a little bit more. And this one was actually not that rough for being built back in 1993, I believe. Don't quote me on that, because I do not. It was either 93 or 94 from what I remember. But this app, because I'm using the Six Flags app for details, and it's not giving me the exact date. But I believe it was around then, and especially for being the first inverted coaster that B&M ever built, it's definitely very smooth. Yeah, it's a good ride. I would give it 7.5 out of 10, and I would definitely ride it while you're there. Next is American Eagle, the racing coaster, the racing wooden coaster at Great America. It is a very smooth coaster for its age, especially for being built in 1976. It's very smooth. It's decently long, and I would say it's a must ride. It was very fun. And the only issue when I was there is the fact that they were only running one side, which I wish I could have ridden both, and we could have possibly gotten close to racing at least once. But I didn't, and that's fine. Just wish I could have, but I'm not going to deduct any points for that. I'd give it 7.5 out of 10, and I would ride it assuming it's open. Next is Goliath, the staple coaster of the park. It is a very good RMC wooden coaster. It's very short. It's definitely on the shorter side, but I will say I had a lot of fun while riding it. The drop is at the perfect angle. Like, it's just, because you know some drops have like that perfect angle. This one is one of those. It gives you a lot of air on the drop, especially if you're in the back row, which I rode in the back row. I never rode it in the front, which I should have, but the line for the front was tremendously longer than the other line, generally. So I tended to go with other rows. The back row was very fun. I rode it at sunset, which was very pretty, seeing the sunset all around. And it was my last ride of the night, because how could I not? I believe I rode this the most. I mean, of course, it's the staple coaster of the park, and it is amazing. The airtime on it forced my hands up. Because, like, the first time I ride stuff, I don't usually put my hands up because I have the nerves going the first time I ride something. But on the first time, it just forced my hands up. It is intense. A dive loop is definitely different because you don't see those very often. So at least I haven't ran into them very often. So it was definitely very fun, especially on a wooden coaster. You don't really see that at all. And the zero-G stall was very fun because it didn't feel like you were upside down, but you were, because the way it curves, it was incredible. This ride, I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. So I believe I covered everything. Now, let's get on to something like Justice League. So their Justice League here, I know there's one in St. Louis, but this one, it's just, I don't know, it felt a little higher quality than the one at St. Louis. It's just, there was things about it that felt higher quality, and it was overall a really good experience. So, and this one actually had all the effects working when I went, like the fire and Joker's gun and stuff, because at St. Louis, many of the effects recently have not been working. They've fixed it in the past 2 weeks, like 2 weeks ago when I went, and the last week I went. They definitely fixed it, but there's still a few issues here and there. But this one had everything working when I went. And overall, it's a very good dark ride if you've ever ridden one of them. So I'd give this, as a dark ride, I'd give it 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10. And I would definitely ride it while you're there. So that about wraps it up for everything here. I did not do Whizzer and Dark Knight Coaster, whatever, as I just didn't find time for it. But I will go back next year, and I plan on riding it. As an overall park, I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10, an 8.5 to a 9 out of 10. It was a very cool park, and I definitely enjoyed the experience, and it's definitely a must visit, especially with Max Force that is coming out next year, which I get to ride, and I will definitely put a review on that next year. Anyway, that is all for this video. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments, because I only have a few more video ideas after this, and then I'm definitely out of video ideas. So if you could leave video ideas in the comments, that would be great. And I will see you all in the next video, which should be announcement analysis and like coaster analysis for 2019 coasters and whatnot. Anyway, I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.